All right. Hi, my name is Lou Smith. I'm here at Atlanta Photography Group. Here to talk about, the exhibition that I've been fortunate to be able to exhibit here in Atlanta. Um, yeah, so the body of work that is currently up right now is Ochas, and Ochas is a long format studio body of work, kind of diving into the mythology of a lot of Afro retentions throughout the Caribbean. Specifically, this work is focusing on Afro-Cuban retentions by way of modern day Nigeria, Benin. Um, yeah, in a nutshell, the body of work really just kind of is questioning, pejorative terms associated with things that come from, Afro descent, right? When you think about the term like voodoo or the term, obeah, if you're in the English speaking countries or, things like that, there's always a negative association with those words. Um, and in actuality, when you actually get a chance to witness, experience, etc., you'll actually see it's actually more akin to Buddhism than not. Um, so there's a lot of socio-political, you know, I guess I won't say combating, but socio-political dialogue that happens with a lot of these types of you know, um, retentions and expressions, throughout the diaspora. Um, yeah, that's pretty much it. That's like um yeah, in a nutshell, so outside of this work, I am in the studio, but I'm really more at home, kind of documenting. I consider myself a long form, photographer. I don't like doing small assignments. I will take, 2, 3, 5, 10 years on one topic. Some of the other work that I'm currently working on is I've actually had the benefit and blessing, I will say, of access to New Orleans masking culture. Um, so the Mardi Gras Indians, even though that's a term they don't necessarily like, but New Orleans masking culture have some very, very, very good friends that have allowed me to come in and document, their culture, their, mythologies, if you will, uh, and also getting a chance to see their celebrations as well, and that's been really, 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 really cool. Uh, Common thread with a lot of my work is really kind of highlighting the underbelly of things, right? Especially within the diaspora, the underbelly of things that typically don't get a lot of publicity or a lot of acknowledgement. And I can say, just as far as the ethics of my practice, one of the ways that I've been able to glean access is actually just treating people like people. Before you actually pull your camera out, like have a conversation with someone. Be a human with them first. Um, and yeah, so that's another body of work. I've been documenting the Atlanta jazz scene for the better part of 20 years or so. Again, another underbelly of music, right? Um, yeah, it's one of the common threads, like I said, just things that people know about but may not be savvy or have a deep understanding to these things. Yeah, that's one of the common threads with a lot of the work that I do. So uh, outside of that, I'm a foodie, which, a lot of these things are very interrelated in my opinion, like food, dance, uh, fashion, language, right? These are the outputs of culture, in my opinion, right? Um, One of the things one of my photography mentors said is if you want to understand or get a good gist of a culture that is not yours, speak to old people, see how they dance, and see what they eat, and you'll get a good sense of their culture. Um, Maybe not all the minutia, but that gives you a starting point or a jumping off point. Jim Alexander, thank you for that. uh, yeah. What else? Yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Any questions? Well, for the people that are here.
So I'm curious about American griots. And I understand the relationship with musicians, and I wanted to talk about some of the other griots
Oh
that
yeah,
you. looked at in that series.
No, for sure, for sure. So for the record, griot is it was a highly prized title throughout West Africa, and these were people that were your culture barriers or culture bearers, I should say. They would know your family's name and the great things that your family did for millennia, and that was their role in society, right? Um, your grandfather, killed a leopard and, he saved the village and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, wow. So there's this cultural remembrance that a griot is responsible for, right? Jazz, and that's a pejorative term. A lot of jazz musicians actually don't like that word. They will go with Black classical music or Black American music, typically. But American griots is kind of showcasing the relationship between them and this music and the griot society or griot caste throughout West Africa, right? So, in relation to your question, um, a lot of the musicians, once they see, like, oh, you're not here just trying to catch something on stage, you're actually trying to see, oh, this is my fashion sense. This is how I'm approaching music. This is how I'm selecting members of my band. Oh, this is the sound or this is the experience I want listeners to have. It's beyond just what's happening on stage at that point, right? Um, they typically don't say no after that, right? Um, so yeah, some of the musicians that I've been fortunate. Christian Scott is a really good friend of mine. Kamasi Washington. These are like the newer vanguards of cats that are doing this type of music. Um, Weedy Brima, he's a really good friend of mine. He was in Time magazine for best avant-garde jazz magazine or jazz album. Um, yeah, and it's interesting, like the correlations between visual arts and musical arts or performing arts, right? Because we're all saying the same thing, right? It's just a different medium in which you're choosing to articulate those thoughts, right? Uh, with jazz musicians, right? Uh, your caliber of musicianship is predicated on how well you know the history of your standards, right? Do you know Night in Tunisia? Do you know right? Okay, so you know that. How are you making it your own, right? So that's where the griot aspect is coming in. There's a very clear understanding within that culture. Um, you have to know where you're coming from in order for you to push it forward. To push it forward, right? Um, can't consider yourself a poet without knowing who Shakespeare is, right? Kind of thing. And you see a lot of that within a lot of like expressions. So, does that answer your question?
It does, it does. And I wasn't clear if all of the subjects in the series are musicians.
Oh yeah,
They all
they
are.
all
Okay.
are. Mhm.
I recognize many, but not all.
Okay, yeah. They're all jazz musicians. I so I'm assuming you went to the site, yeah. Yeah, so Sam Yee, God rest, he was a pillar for the Atlanta jazz scene here. He had the longest running jazz club here, Churchill Grounds by Fox Theater. He recently passed. I believe that was last year. I have photos of him as well because again, you don't have to be on stage to be a part of the culture, right? So him just having a space, having the wherewithal to be like, hey, these guys are saying something. I need to create an environment for them to be able to articulate their thoughts and to do it for 40 plus years in Atlanta, hat goes off, so Sam is part of that series as well, but yeah, predominantly is musicians, but people just,
Is it ongoing or?
it's it's been gone, it's ongoing. Yeah, it's been about 20 plus years since I've been working on that,
Travel
oh
for
yeah.
this?
Mhm. No, I travel for it. Some of the guys, though, I'll be on the road with them. I'll be the road photographer, which is cool. That's a whole nother dynamic. Tour buses aren't fun. Also, I'm horrible at that. Nicole, yeah. Everyone tells me it's like, Lou, you should really put your stuff out. I'm, honestly, and this is an existential thought, right? Um, I don't do work for the sake of putting it out. I do work because It's the act of doing it that's really appealing, right? It's something my grandmother used to always tell me, growing up. She's like, don't seek recognition, seek to be worthy of recognition, right? So it's the practice of it. I like being around people who are thought provoking. I love being around people where we're having conversations like this in relation to their medium or their craft. What happens as a result of that is, that's cool, but it's the actual act of like the conversation, the actual act of seeing someone in their element. Um, so no, I need to do a better job, shame on me, right? Awesome. Any more questions?
Because all those experiences, and you told me about West Africa. A couple of years ago, a friend wanted to go to a tour of homes, and she bought these CBD gummies. She gave me one, I collapsed, and couldn't walk. And this is in the ambulance for me. And guy who's, taking my blood pressure, giving me fluids, and in the ambulance. And I see his arm. I couldn't tell if it was a tattoo or or I don't know. But anyway, so I have a real visual memory, and memories come back, I guess. And I asked him, what is that? He said, oh, it's a West African warrior.
Oh, okay.
And then the other thing is that came to me is I'm from Ann Arbor, and I was an usher at all these concerts, and I still see all these movies in my little brain. There's Duke Ellington stomping across the stage. It's a visual, it's music, it's all, I feel it in my bones.
For sure, for sure, for sure.
Combination. I'd be curious about any connection. I have this with classical music also, and no visual because I didn't see. I'd go to these concerts in Tanglewood, BB King, Jefferson Airplane, all the Fillmore East concerts, and I wasn't close enough. The only thing I did there was rush the stage where I just had to with Janis Joplin.
Okay, okay.
So, it's in us. We absorb this. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, and that's one of the interesting things on this side of the Atlantic, I will say. You cannot dive into anything of Black origin without it being socio-political. And that's a very unfortunate thing. But even in lieu of that, these are the things that define like cultures, right? So there is no conversations about Brazil without touching on samba. And samba, just for the record, is actually a Central African word to rub belly buttons. So when you see to rub belly buttons, that's what samba means. Mm-hmm. So when you see dancers dance samba, they're rubbing belly buttons, right? You can't have a so
Question. Say about how important it is in the jazz culture for you to have your chops, to know the history and to understand yourself where you are in that history. So, as a photographer, could you tell me how you see yourself? What lineage do you see?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I probably a little unhealthy, but Jim Marshall is like one of my favorites. Not because of what he produced. What he produced is absolutely magnificent, right? But it was his level of access and his level of comfort that he was able to get around people, right? Tangent and go back in, come back out. So the term jazz actually it's a derogatory word in its origins. It means jackass. So we're talking about classical music, and the people who were playing quote unquote jackass music, they're of a certain ethnic group, right? So it was a derogatory term, and you don't know classical music. That's why you're playing these wrong notes. When in all actuality, we're playing these wrong notes intentionally to make fun of this classical music. So I have to know classical music in order to play the wrong note, right? And then that becomes an art form in and of itself, right? So with that being said, jazz, in my humble opinion, was America's first like heavy metal, or America's first like grime, if you're talking about London music, right? You're talking, yeah, it is very punk in an 80s, 70s term, right? But we're talking about people in the 1930s, 1920s, right? Um, oh, I play, yeah, percussion. Yep, Latin jazz, yeah. Uh, so yeah, so Jim Marshall, what I think is fascinating with him is we're talking about a photographer who's active in the 50s, 60s, all the way to the 80s, right? You're dealing with people who have been ousted musically. You're dealing with people who've been ousted venue wise. And here is somebody who does not look like them gaining access and intimate access with that. That says a lot more about his heart and his person and his ethics than what he actually produced. What he produced is a result of that, you know. So Jim Marshall is one of my faves for sure. Of course, you can DeCarava, of course, right? Jim Alexander, who's living here in Atlanta, right? you know, yeah, seriously. I have a funny story with him, how I met him. But yeah, so does that answer your question? Yeah.
And I'm also very proud of you for that way of thinking. I wish a lot more photographers gave real thought to just that question.
Yeah, yeah,
Thing.
for sure. If we're creatives, right, the notion of being authentic with your craft, I would argue is a notion of being authentic as a human. That's going to come through with your work. So the more human you are, the more beautiful and more authentic your artwork's going to be. So I think she had a I think she had a question right before you. Yeah, yeah. Ideal state in the sense of like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. E, all of the above. Yeah, yeah. So one of the things, and it's super understated, super nuanced, but the sequencing of the work in the gallery here. Um, so I've been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to actually go and experience like an Afro-Cuban ceremony. And there is a protocol that is followed. It's not just, willy-nilly kind of thing, right? The sequencing of the work is actually following the order in which a ceremony would occur, right? So with that being said, in an ideal situation, I would love to have an exhibition that really echoes like the regalia that you see in these ceremonies. Um, it's very akin to like Catholic cathedrals, but in a very Afro-Caribbean way. It's actually quite fascinating as far as like the juxtaposition of the cultures, you know. Um, super or very Rococo, very, very Rococo, but they're speaking in, a Lukumi or Yoruba dialect, and it's like, wow, this is Spanish Rococo mashed up with Afro. This thing is very looks much African. It's a beautiful thing, So in an ideal state, like having an exhibition where really hone in on the experience of that would be pretty awesome. And then of course, coffee table book. Who doesn't like books, right? Yeah.
Work is very important since you're thinking about how it comes through just like a ritual.
For sure. 1000%. 1000.
Two-part.
Two-parter.
So, the second part will be more fun. When did you, start your photographic journey? When did you pick up the camera?
I literally was talking to my mother about this during Thanksgiving. She bought me, it was a Kodak 122 camera. I couldn't have been no more than 5. And she actually found the negatives. And of course it's like, me shooting the dog and but the cool thing, so side, my mother is like the coolest person ever. Like she is. Uh Part of her giving me that camera, and she gave me the first one. And I remember this. She gave me the roll of film, right? She was like, okay, well, after you're done with that roll of film, you're gonna have to use your chore money to go and get that developed. Like, what does that mean? Well, we're going to go to the drugstore, and you have to use your chore money. If you don't have your chore money, then you can't get it developed. So now I'm like, I got to do all of my chores because I got to see what's on. And honestly, I remember getting getting the envelope with the negatives and my pictures, and it's like, so this little thing makes this, and it's been a downhill problem since then. But my first job was at Ritz Camera. My very first job. That's where I cut my teeth in the dark room. Yeah.
That's a great way to start.
Yeah.
So part two, there's your, what I'll call your gee whiz phase, right? These things come out of nothing. Do you remember when there was a catalyst so that you started to look at this as serious craft, serious art?
Honestly, no. No. My profession, I'm actually a creative director by profession. So I spend exhaustive amounts of time on the computer and I don't like it. um, which is where shooting analog, being in the dark room, it gets me off of that. So photography's kind of always been like a reprieve.
Yeah, kind of antidote.
Yeah, anecdotal to like life kind of things. So yeah, there was never like a wow, I'm really gonna do this now. Like it's just always been there. I have gone through moments where I intentionally did not pick up a camera intentionally, only to the extent of my first time going to Cuba. I was there studying music, right? I oh yeah, music is like everywhere there. I didn't have a camera with me for the 3 weeks that I was there. I did not shoot one thing. I audio recorded a lot, but yeah, in that time period, I do remember having a conscientious thought of this is going to take away from the point of me being here, right? I'm here for music. Let me connect with the music, not the visuals. And there's plenty of visuals down there. So yeah, it's always been more of an anecdotal thing, photography versus yeah, I'm gonna do this. So yeah. Awesome. Any more questions? Yeah.
Okay, so that being the case, you have this series that you said it's been a lifelong work. Your jazz series.
Mhm.
What other do you have other projects that you're considering?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So I mentioned, the masking tradition in New Orleans, right? No, that's been about 5 years. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So interestingly enough, that body of work started honestly just kind of going to the birthplace of jazz. So I was like, well, let me go to New Orleans. And that was literally the auspice in which I was going there, right? And so I'm hanging, I'm meeting people, etc. And I remember I am on the corner and I see, you know, these feathers just kind of coming down the street. Like, so my family's Caribbean. So, I'm familiar with carnival culture and everything, right? And I'm like, oh, well, it must be a Caribbean Day parade here. And one of my friends, he's like, oh, that ain't nothing but some Indians. I'm sorry, said what? Said what? He's like, yeah, no, those are Indians, man. And they're coming down, and it was a funeral. I didn't know at the time, but they were coming down. It was a funeral. And I'm listening to like the call and response, the chants, and it's not in English. Like, hold up, hold up, hold up, hold up, hold up. You just really kind of, and this is New Orleans, right? So I go back to my friend. I'm like, yo, so what is all of this? He was like, oh man, that's Mardi Gras Indians, man. Like, yeah, that's, for people who can't come out on Mardi Gras, they actually bring Mardi Gras to them. And their suits and the language and the music, that's part of it. And it's like, that's been here since forever. I'm like, do you know that this is in like, we have carnival in the Caribbean and it literally looks just like that. He's like, no, I didn't know that. So it's like these connections that are not connected, you know? Um, but yeah, no, that body of work started on me going to New Orleans to dig into the inception of jazz, and that spawned into this. Um, Other bodies of work that I have. My son, he just graduated, so he's always had a camera in his face. I have a lot of evidence for him now. Let me say. um, Southern Hajj series, yeah. So my family immigrated from Trinidad. This is my grandparents in the 1940s. So my mother, uncles, they're all first generation, right? Um, the church that all of my relatives are buried at, it is in rural Georgia. But the interesting thing is the first Sunday of every August, all of the families that were pivotal to that church, their descendants all congregate there. And it's almost like an ancestral recall, if you will. So they're like, my name is so and so, and my great grandmother was so and so who married so and so, and blah blah. And you can actually see like their contributions to this church via the stained glass. So I've been documenting a lot of the elders, um, you know, since I've been back in Atlanta. A lot of the elders that congregate there. So Southern Hajj, meaning in Islam you go to Hajj. This is literally the exact same thing that's happening, right? That's another body of work that I'm working on. Uh, Two Lies. It's an interesting thing, and this is again in New Orleans. Most people would associate New Orleans with like Bourbon Street and getting beads and flashing and all that. That's one side of New Orleans. The other side of New Orleans is when you start digging into the neighborhoods, was where you see the masking traditions, the Indians, et cetera, et cetera. And it's night and day. Having witnessed that, it's actually kind of it's it's a bit of a mental trip, because you go to New Orleans and everybody's there under one auspice. And it's like, okay, this is what I'm expecting. People are completely plastered, and then you go into the quote unquote bad side of the neighborhood, and it's like, wow, this is a cookout. Wow, these Indians are coming to old people's homes and they're like literally bringing Mardi Gras to them. I've seen elder people in New Orleans break down crying, when the Indians show up, because like, wow, I couldn't get out and you brought this to me. And you talk to, the elders in the masking tradition. It's like, that's what we're here for. Legally, we weren't allowed to participate on Bourbon Street. So we created our own. The interesting thing, even with that, is you see that type of reasoning logic throughout the diaspora. It's like, we're ostracized in one space. Okay, we create something over here, and it's a completely different, ambiance, vibe, situation. And then those are the beautiful things that I definitely like lean into.
I'm thinking of these movies, The Harder They Come, with reggae.
Okay.
That, I don't know about that relationship to jazz.
So it's interesting. I will say New Orleans is not America in the sense of culturally. It is the most Northern Caribbean city. Like how people in New Orleans operate is very similar to how people in the Caribbean operate. Yeah. There's a lot of historical connections, specifically with New Orleans, Haiti, and Cuba, that goes into the fabric of like New Orleans culture. Uh, Everyone is familiar with Congo Square, right? That was like the free space on Sundays that slaves were allowed to just be. right? That was also the space that the Choctaw and Chupatula natives were also allowed to just be. So it kind of turns into, a bit of a machismo, my culture stronger than your culture, and all of this starts mashing together, right? You find the exact same dynamic in Pelourinho in Brazil, right? That's where capoeira, samba, etc. Uh-huh. That's capoeira is actually a Tupi word, right? It's not Portuguese. Okay, so yeah, yeah. Uh-huh. So Pelourinho is the equivalent of Congo Square. In Matanzas, Cuba, La Marina is the equivalent of that. So La Marina in Cuba is colloquially called Little Africa.
It's so.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
One of the back streets, the great thing with Cuba.
In Cuba, were you in Havana? Okay. Okay. Got you. Got you. Got you. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's part of the culture there. It's part of the culture. Whether people actively like say, but it's everyone has connections to it because. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That I feel that really.
Mm-hmm. No, and it's Spanish for cocoa.
Yeah.
Right, right. But no, you find these areas like throughout, and this is exclusively on this side of the Atlantic because political, historical differences on the continent didn't exist the same way over here, right? But you find these areas where it's like, okay, we're gonna give you this space to do you. And as long as you do it between these times and these times, everything's fine. And those things evolve into some really, really beautiful things. You know, um, this is in Algiers. It's credited as being the birthplace of jazz. You probably know about this, but it used to be a brothel. Yeah, Algiers is on the other side of the river. Yeah. Oh no. But yeah, there's a spot that's credited as being the birthplace of jazz, and these were soldiers returning from, I believe, if it wasn't the Civil War, it was the war right after that. But these were, Black soldiers who were not allowed to participate in the armory, so you can play music or you can be a cook. These musicians, after the war, they come back and they're playing classical music wrong, and this was funny because people knew that it was wrong, right? But it was a brothel. Like that's kind of the birthplace of jazz, right? Okay. Mm-hmm.
About the slave trade, but what I remember is the dancing and the music and king,
Mm-hmm.
the culture.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. There's actually a really good one. It was done by Maya Deren. She was a dance choreographer. She was classically trained in jazz, 1940s, 1950s. Um, what I think is beautiful, and it goes back to the humanity aspect, right? And this is what I gleaned from her. She was actually Jewish from New York. Um, she went to Haiti to study Haitian folklore dance. And the level of humanity that she received from people who, you don't mess with them, right? She actually became an initiate into the Haitian voodoo, but she has a series. It's called Divine Horseman. It was like produced in like the 1950s or so, but it's her documenting her travels, her experiences, in Haiti. You know, um, what I think is beautiful about that is here you have an American, woman going to a third world country and seeing the beauty there, but you wouldn't have seen that in America in the 40s, 1950s. That shows like her level of ethics, you know, um, and as a result, like an openness to things. So the Maya Deren technique is a very well-known dance performing arts technique. But that was all predicated on someone kind of going somewhere with an open mind and an open heart, you know?
I, I wonder, was this always the vision throughout the years of working on this, or did you start somewhere else and,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Honestly, like no, there weren't any stages. I think the yeah, well, I would say that this is I have another body of work called Street Oracles. And it's conceptually the same as this, but the difference being um when you start getting into the philosophy of like a lot of Afro-Caribbean like retentions, um, the first thing that you learn is there's no such thing as like happen chance, right? So if I were to walk outside and I stump my toe, there's a reason I stumped my toe, right? So Street Oracles, I would say, is probably the proto version of this. And it's predominantly street photography, and I hate that term, but you know, we'll go with that. Um, predominantly street photography around situations, environments that harken back to the Odisha or the Santo, right? The storytelling, exactly. So for instance, you know, there's two images, I believe, yeah, two in there. Elegua in the Afro-Cuban, you know, we were talking about this at the opening, right? Um, that spirit, that energy is very akin to Mercury. He's the divine messenger, but he's also a trickster. He will play games, you know, to kind of teach you a lesson, right? Um, One of the things that are associated with the legua are children, and really threes and sevens, right? So if I were to walk outside and I see a group of kids, you know, three kids at an intersection, from a scene perspective, you can make the argument, oh, that's a legua checking on me. This is how, you know, people who practice this would view that, right? Oh, well, maybe if I give these kids some candy, they won't play a trick on me. Let me get favor with these kids. No, that's the ooga booga juju side of it. The other side of it is just be a good person. And how about like these kids, you know, wow, that's a cool person. They gave me candy. What does that do for a society? What does that do for a community at that point if everyone is looking at things, you know, I guess philosophically or with a deeper intent, you know? So I would say to answer your question, Street Oracles was probably the foray or the proto of this. This was kind of really dialing in on the allegory of all these things. Yeah.
what should we call it?
Lou. Yeah. Simple. Yeah, Lou. Any more questions? Yeah.
Um, so I found it interesting that you said that your day job is creative director.
Mhm.
Is that right? One of the things that I really appreciated about your work, so often when photographers set out with an idea, I'm going to do studio portraits, and about these, the pantheon,
Mhm.
these beings, spirits, gods. Anyways, is so often they have the exact same composition, this
Mm,
kind of literalness of I have stood a person in front of
sure.
me and this and that. I appreciated the very dynamic
Thank you.
composition,
Yeah. Yeah.
and and I was wondering, is that because you're used to thinking ahead on how it would work on a page and how it just wouldn't look right if it was same thing,
Right.
right?
For sure.
Anything else about
Yeah.
things you picked up?
Yeah. And I think we spoke about this briefly at the opening, yeah. Um, so a lot of times, like when I'm running across you know, potential models for this particular body of work, right? It starts off with a convo. And I just try to, you know, again, some people are naturally funny. Like, and it's like, wow, like you have a skill, you know. Other people are very like charming, and it's just part of the thing, right? Those are the things that I'm paying attention to before I even get them in the studio, right? And then I'm allowing those things to kind of come out once I get them in the studio. So with that, yeah, there may be a loose idea in mind. Um, but also being open to, okay, well, I may have came in with this loose idea, but them just going and grabbing, a bottle of water, that might be like, oh, okay, dude, I need for you to do that one more time. And so that's where a lot of like, I guess the variations with the images, um, where that kind of comes from with this work.
Like,
Mhm.
4x5,
Mhm.
the monorail.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. For sure.
Can change different.
Right. Yeah, and like that, and that's kind of the fun slash challenging part, right? If someone did something that is like, okay, that would actually be cool if I brought the camera down here. I've never done this before. Let's see what happens. Right? Right. Let's see what happens. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Last week I found myself with 14 different seeds.
I know the pain. I know the pain. I know the pain.
Hard straight in your head. I need to.
Yeah.
You're walking down the street and boom.
Right. Okay, so and this may not be the best way, but it is a way. I lean on Lightroom's collections heavily, right? So, okay, if I'm shooting, if I to your point, if I'm walking down the street and I see something that's like, oh, I have to get that shot, right? And it's film. Okay, I'm making a mental note. When I develop this role, there is a frame that I need to scan and add to the collection that fits with this body, right? If it's my digital camera, yeah, when I dump the hard drive or dump the SD card, it's like, okay, well, I know that there's some frames in here that may fit into this collection or this collection, et cetera. But I lean very heavily on the collections, pending that I am shooting mostly analog with the sprinkling of digital, you know. Um, yeah. um, I will say, and I'm saying this having witnessed this from Mr. Alexander, right? Coming up with some sort of Dewey Decimal System to your negatives is just as important as the actual archiving of the negatives. So every image, and Nicole can attest to this, every image in my hard drive, I know exactly what binder, what year, where that negative is, because in the event that I need to run a print, I don't want to spend a week looking for like one frame, right? Does that answer your question? Right. Yeah, and Jim, like, man, well, that's the reason he has like, his cabal of people. It's like, I can only imagine you have 80 plus years of like work, negatives. And sometimes like it'll be like, yeah, that print, and he'll tell you exactly what that is, but where's the negative? That's why you're here. Like, it's like, no, that can't be my reality. So yeah, no, I'm pretty systematic with, you know, how I'm documenting like the actual archival, system. And whatever it is, I go by year and, just kind of making sure I'm consistent, you know. So
Are you specific something coming up for a series?
nope. Yeah, nope. It just happens. I spend a lot of I shoot like a lot. Like yeah. If I'm on assignment, like with a jazz musician, I just came back from New Orleans. One of my friends, she's a performing artist. Um, she brought me down there to kind of document, the whole like festival that she put on. Um, if it's not commercial work, you know, yeah, it's like when I start seeing a thread of consistency, that's kind of like the kickoff, right? It's like, huh, okay, well, this kind of relates to this image. This kind of, what if I like dedicate like 3 months to just this, right? And see what happens. That's kind of how I work, you know, um, where two or more images are gathered together. Right, right. Yeah, no, good question. Thank you. Any more?
In the series, In the View of Giants,
Mhm.
there's a portrait of Chief Adjua, and it's moving. I wonder, so for the folks at home and people here, would you mind describing the portrait and then talk about how it came about? Yeah,
Which one? Yeah, because I got a lot of.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay, so for the record, uh, I'm gonna make the assumption that people here are familiar with Afrofuturism. Yeah, a little bit. Okay, so the premise, by and large, of Afrofuturism, it was a, I can't even say it was a music or a it was just an art style that kind of developed in the early mid 70s or so on the hills of psychedelia. Yeah, and funk for sure. Um, Afrofuturism is predicated on current society is so horrible for Black people that we should start looking into outer space for reprieve. Yeah. Um, your jazz musicians, Pharoah Sanders, your jazz musicians, Sun Ra, they were really big vanguards of Afrofuturism. Christian Scott, Chief Adjua, is a 2026 rendition of that. But you're going to hear influences of hip hop. You're going to hear influences of things that are current for this time period, you know? That even goes to his fashion. And he's super fashionable guy, right? He's pulling a lot from areas throughout the diaspora, but making it uniquely his own. In addition to the music, like I said, the culture of it, right? So that was when he went from, I don't know if you were listening to him when he had like the box and the cuts and all that, right? That was his first time coming in with the, I guess the Kemet like kind of thing. And that was just like, Chris, dude, like, he's like, nah, I gotta look fly for him, you know? And he turned around and I was like, okay, let me get that shot. He was on stage. He was on stage with that one. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. No, he was backstage.
Oh.
We were backstage on that. Yep. Yep. So yeah. Yeah. So that's the story of that image. Yeah. Yeah. Now, Chris is a real good friend. Him and his brother Kyle, like real good friends of mine.
I love his music.
Yeah.
And his style.
Yeah, he's a stylish guy. Awesome. Any more questions or we got anything online? We have anything online or?
No.
Okay. Cool. Well, that's all I got. Thank you guys for coming. Yeah. Thank you guys for coming. So, and